Chapter 5, Part 2. A greater sensitivity, I believe, now exists among major health organizations around the issue of certain stigmatizing language. Nevertheless, the overwhelming focus on finding the cure can still feed stigma. The first goal of the U.S. National Plan to address Alzheimer's disease as an outgrowth of President Obama's 2011 National Alzheimer's Project Act is to prevent and effectively treat Alzheimer's disease by 2025. Campaigns like the Alzheimer's Association Search for the First Survivor of Alzheimer's, while a provocative concept, render invisible those persons who are living long and well with dementia, suggesting that only those who are fully cured are considered to be survivors. The Pure Imagination Project, launched in 2017, uses images of a disappearing landscape to illustrate the effects of Alzheimer's disease, with the tagline, "Alzheimer's can steal your imagination piece by piece, but with your help, imagine how we can end it." The ad reinforces the idea that Alzheimer's causes people, or at least vital aspects of who they are, to steadily vanish, and that this thief must be stopped, cured. While of course the disease entails diminishment, these fundraising efforts often eclipse the many non-biomedical initiatives that are promoting the well-being of people living with dementia. They shift attention away from the examination of social and political factors such as poverty and racism, which may contribute to high rates of dementia among certain groups. African Americans, for instance, develop Alzheimer's disease at about twice the rate of their white counterparts. And they also ignore the ways in which persons with Alzheimer's disease and their care partners do not always or only experience inexorable loss. A disproportionate emphasis on cures often comes at the price of promoting, however unintentionally, stereotypes and stigma around Alzheimer's victims. Such dementia experts, wary of these tactics and the promise of a magic pill, are approaching dementia differently. The neurologist Peter Whitehouse, author of The Myth of Alzheimer's, eschews the Alzheimer's diagnosis, seeing Alzheimer's as a spectrum of disorders rather than one disease that has a cure. The best tools for preventing and minimizing symptoms of cognitive impairment, argues Whitehouse, include public health initiatives around diet, exercise, and reducing head injuries and exposure to environmental toxins. He also stresses the importance of elders engaging in purposeful work, ongoing learning, and intergenerational relationships. Although the narrative has shifted some in recent years, since the 1970s, Alzheimer's has been framed more often than not as a foreboding force that can be thwarted, ameliorated, and ultimately cured only through biotechnological advances, a logic predicated on what Ballinger calls medical triumphalism, in which modern medicine is cast as the only or best source of hope. This disproportionate faith in medical science to solve all forms of diminishment, perhaps especially cognitive diminishment, persists, and I can't help but see the light-dark dichotomy at play in medical triumphalism. The light of medical technology will triumph over the dark of dementia. Enlightened minds will save endarkened ones. In the meantime, the rest of us must simply watch while our loved ones succumb to the darkness, taking their place among other fear-laced dementia descriptors. The dark images swirling around dementia serve to deepen dementia's dread. They tap into our deeply embedded cultural bias against darkness, laying bare our dark fears and exploiting them to amplify the threat of Alzheimer's. It occurs to me that these images are permutation on pervasive vanishing metaphors. Darkness, after all, renders one invisible, but they carry an additional charge of stupidity, depravity, and menace. However, in order for darkness metaphors to work in reinforcing an atmosphere of acute anxiety around dementia, we must continue to agree, however tacitly, to the premise that darkness is bad, wrong, fearful. This reflexive bias for light and against dark is in no way innocent. It splits the world into stark hierarchies in which dark and light persist, not as two distinctive yet interdependent elements, each equally needing the other, but as disparate, opposing forces. Light, dark, asymmetry both reflects the generate's injustice. The history of racism bears this out in horrifying specificity. This dysfunctional division underlies the deception that light can or should exist apart from shadow, that the former rightly crowds out the latter, that boundless light signals boundless good. Such disunion maligns darkness and disavows its wisdom. Are there ways to retrain our reflexive disdain for darkness and reclaim the dark's necessities and possibilities? How can we rehabilitate our implicit loathing for dementia and its so-called dimming? I don't have all the answers to this, but I believe that thinking about these issues, reflecting on them seriously and with empathy, is the only effective way to move toward a sense of balance. I suppose this book is a way of attempting corrections to undermine light's supremacy, to affirm dark's worth, and to find a way of approaching dementia that does not rely on such easy metaphors and polarities. After my grandfather's funeral in 2014, I began the work of trying to reclaim darkness as metaphor. My pursuit led me to a rather obscure figure from my past, to Father James, the only Catholic professor at my divinity school. He was both brother and father, a Benedictine monk and an ordained priest. Every day he wore gray sweatpants and a logo-less gray hooded sweatshirt. His hands were regularly buried in his front pouch, fingering his rosary. He had a greasy, unstudied comb-over, and I don't recall him ever smiling. When I saw him in the gym, he always held a small, ragged Latin prayer book to his face, sweating and praying while he walked on the treadmill, never noticing, or at least never responding to, my greetings. Although I experienced Father James as terribly dour, I did respect his commitment to a simple life of prayer and modest means. While the teachings of other more affable and accessible professors entirely escape me now, bits of James' pre-modern inflected wisdom have returned to me in the decades since I finished divinity school. He claimed without apology or hint of irony that the invention of the electric light bulb is the source of much evil. It initiated a pivotal tide shift when he turned our back on prayer, scriptural memorization, and the holiness of natural rhythms. My initial reaction to his assertion was utter dismissal. The capacity to light the night not only felt necessary and natural, but also unquestionably good. What did a cranky monk, nose buried in the Latin falser, know about the way the world worked anyway? Now, as I increasingly distrust the assumption that light is always right, I revisit his theory. For its shades of truth. Our national sleep shortage may help prove Father James' point. Nearly 1/3 of adults in the United States do not get enough sleep, a fact the CDC calls an unmet public health problem. Insufficient sleep precipitates an increase in motor vehicle crashes, industrial accidents, and chronic diseases. Constant artificial illumination, be the light, light the way, contributes to our sleep epidemic. Because the light emanating from electric devices activates the brain and disrupts circadian rhythms, the National Sleep Foundation recommends a bedtime routine conducted away from bright lights. The CDC names round-the-clock access to technology as a probable contributing factor to our dangerous lack of sleep. To no small effect, excessive artificial light also creates the peculiarly modern phenomenon of light pollution, which simultaneously washes out the night sky and wastes energy. Most of us must travel long distances to see what our ancestors readily observed, pondered, and revered, the splendors of our own galaxy. Not only does artificial illumination directly and immediately disturb sleep and obstruct stargazing, it fosters a culture of constant stimulation, and its diffuse damages the growing darkness of day's end. No longer dictates that we too must wind down. Rather, we plug in, flip on, and amp up. We never have to power down when we have ample electricity and ample machines to run on it. We can work ourselves, others, and the land without end, it seems. We need not look up, perhaps debating the particular merits of or deficits of the light bulb is beside the point. Surely we can count the ways the electric bulb has helped our lives, as well as the ways evil thrived before the electric bulb too. The proliferation of light without respect for darkness signals a larger movement, the ceaseless escalation of human mastery over the earth. When we disallow darkness its regular place in our lives and permit light to rule the day and the night, we welcome imbalance. We tempt ourselves to more and more work and activity, and ironically, to more passivity as we turn to screens, forsaking, among other things, quiet rest, simple artistry, artful husbandry, and sustained concentration. We buy into what Wendell Berry calls the doctrine of general human limitlessness. Although there is no such thing as a limitless animal, we believe humans are the exception. Berry warns that this thinking leads us to grasp for limitless possessions, knowledge, science, technology, and progress, which can only lead to limitless violence, waste, war, and destruction. A woefully skewed picture of the world emerges in which limited humans can literally make all life on the planet disappear, including our own, clinging to vain delusions of limitlessness. We hasten our ultimate limit, death, whether it is the harm done to our bodies through disrupted sleep or the breathtaking extermination of entire ecosystems. When we assume a boundlessness that is never ours to attain, we court disintegration. Perhaps Father James did not know something about the way the world worked. After all, when we forsake darkness, when we try to do away with night, or any earthbound equilibrium for that matter, we are seeking to be something we are not, that elusive, limitless animal.